right, hello sixth graders. We are still in Unit 5 today. Our topic is rates and ratio proportions. Our learning targets: I can identify proportional relationships and I can solve proportions. So you should have your note template in front of you to take notes on. All right, we have a vocab word here: proportions. This is an equation that states two ratios are equivalent. They have a constant rate or ratio. Proportional relationships would also have the same unit rate. So for example, here in the box here, we have a proportion. 1/2 is equal to 3/6. Those are two ratios that are equal to each other. Or 8 feet for 10 seconds is equal to 4 feet in 5 seconds. Okay. Something to note: if the ratios are not a proportion, then that means that we would call them non-proportional. Another vocab word: cross products. The cross products of any proportion are equal. You can compare unit rates or cross products to identify proportional relationships. So if you were looking at two ratios, you could find the unit rate for them and compare them to decide if they are proportional, otherwise cross products. We're going to practice a lot with cross products here. For example, on this here, using this proportion from above, if we were to take it and multiply the diagonals, so 2 times 3 and 1 times 6, notice that they are equal to each other, and that's because they are proportional. The first thing we want to practice is setting up the proportions. It's very important that how we set up one side of the proportion, the other side matches it. So we have a baker can make 25 cakes in 4 days. At that rate, it would take 12 days for him to make 75 cakes. Set up the proportion for this situation. So there's a couple ways we could do it. We could do cake over days, or you could do the opposite and do days over cakes. But however you set up one side, the other side needs to be the same. I'm going to do cake over days because that's just the order it came up in. So if it takes 25 cakes in 4 days, and then let's see, it would take 12 days. So days is on the bottom and cakes was on the top on the other side. So cake is going to stay on the top on that side. So again, you could set it up either way. So we could do 4 cakes for 25, or 4 days for 25 cakes and 12 days for 75 cakes. But however you set up the one side of the ratio, the other side has to match it. The next one: during the last snowstorm, 22 inches of snow fell in 7 hours. At this rate, in 17.5 hours, 55 inches of snow would have fallen. Set up the proportion for the situation. So again, you could put snow on the top or you could put hours on the top. But however you set up one side, the other side has to match it. So because inches came up first, I'm just going to do inches over hours. So then the other side would also need to be inches, the 55 inches, over 17.5 hours. If you had chosen to do hours on the top, then on your second ratio, hours would need to be on the top as well. Now, looking at identifying proportional relationships. So we have a word problem here. A carousel makes 4 complete turns after 64 seconds and 5 complete turns after 76 seconds. Based on this information, is the number of turns made by this carousel proportional to the time in seconds? 2 ways that we could do this. We could compare the unit rates, or we could do the cross products. So let's look at both of them. Starting with the unit rates, we are going to set that up as seconds over complete turns. So 64 seconds over 4 turns. And the other one was 76 seconds over 5 complete turns. And we're going to figure out how much time it takes for one turn and see if they are equal that way. So again, to do that, remember we're going to divide the top and bottom by the bottom number. So 64 divided by 4 is 16 seconds for one turn. On the other side, we're going to divide the top and bottom by the bottom number, which is 5 in this case. So 76 divided by 5, which is 15 and 2/10 seconds for 1 turn. So based on that information, no, they are not equivalent, or they're not proportional. So no, and where it says explain, well, it takes longer to do more turns on when there's 4 turns. The other way is to compare the ratios by comparing cross products. So set up the proportion first. Again, you could either do time over turns or turns over times. I'm just going to do this way because that's how we set it up before, with the time on top and turns on the bottom. And then find the cross products. So multiply the diagonals together and see if they are equal to each other. So 64 times 5, 76 times 4. So 64 times 5 is 320, and 76 times 4 is 304. So no, they are not proportional because these two numbers do not equal each other. So you decide which method you prefer. Do you like finding the unit rates and comparing those, or do you prefer to use the cross products? It's up to you. Here's where I would like you to pause and try these on your own, determining if the two quantities are proportional. Once you have tried them on your own, watch the rest of the way through this slide to see if you have done them correctly. So the first problem is 60 voted out of 100 registered and 84 voted out of 140 registered. I'm going to use the cross products, so I'm going to set up my proportion. I'm going to do the amount that voted out of the number registered. So then again on the other side, the amount voted is 84 out of the registered 140. And then again do the cross products. So 60 times 140, and I'm showing all my work just in case I make a mistake, we can find it. 84 times 100. Instead of saying, oh, I did it on my calculator, I want to see what you're doing on your calculator. So 60 times 140, which is 8,400. And then 84 times 100 is also 84,000. Or 8,400, sorry. So are they proportional? Yes, they are. Next one, $12 for 16 yards of fabric and $9 for 24 yards of fabric. Again, I'm going to do the cross products. So start by setting up my proportion. I'm going to do dollars over yards just because that's the order that it shows up in. So the other side would also need to be dollars over yards. Now find the cross products by multiply the diagonals. So we're going to do 12 times 24 and 9 times 16. So 12 times 24 is 288. This part I'm just using my calculator to help me. 9 times 16, which is 144. So no, they are not proportional. The price to the amount of yards is not equal between the two amounts. Next thing is we're going to solve proportions. So we have a missing number here. Just something to note with mental math. Some proportions can be solved using mental math. So just looking for those relationships. If we know that 10 times 30, or going from 10 to 30 is times 3, we could also multiply the top by 3. So that's something to look for. Okay. This one I don't see any of that. So what we would do, we're going to use our cross products. We're going to multiply the sides that we have. So 7 times 21. Multiply the other side. 5 times C. So now let's solve the side with the two numbers that we have. 7 times 21, which is 147, equals 5 times C. I'm going to use that just so it doesn't get confused with an X. Now, if we're taking 5 times C, in order to solve for C, we could do the opposite, or kind of undo it, and the opposite of multiplication is division. So I could divide that side by 5, and whatever I do to one side of my equation, I'm also going to do to the other side. So then we would have 147 divided by 5, which is 29 and 4/10. So multiply the 21 times 7 and then divide by the third number, the 5. So let's try that on this next one. Multiply the two diagonals together, so 13 times 8 and 2 and 6/10 times n. So let's figure out 13 times 8, which is 104, equals 2 and 6/10 times n. Now again, if we are multiplying 2 and 6/10 times n, in order to undo it or solve for n, we're going to do the opposite, which means to divide by 2 and 6/10 on both sides. So if we are multiplying and dividing, that would cancel, and we are just left with n equals, and then 104 divided by 2 and 6/10. Let's try that again. Divided by 2 and 6/10, typed it in wrong, so that would be 40. We can always check by plugging our answer back into the original proportion. Now that we have it plugged in, we could do our cross products. So 2 and 6/10 times 40, which is 104. And then 13 and 8, which we had already found out was 104 on the last one, so that works. So you can check your answer, and if it doesn't come back that the cross products are equal, then it means something went wrong, and we should go back and check our work. Again, here's where I would like you to pause, try these on your own, and then watch through and see if you got the correct answers. So the first one, 16 over k equals 2 over 3. This is one where you could use mental math. So looking from here to here, well, I'm multiplying by 8. So I could also multiply the bottom times 8. 3 times 8 is 24, so k should equal 24. But I also am going to use the cross products to solve this one too. So we're going to do 3 times 16 and 2 times k. So 3 times 16, which is 48, equals 2 times k. Again, opposite of multiplication, we're going to divide both sides by 2. And we're just left with k equals, and 48 divided by 2 is 24. So k equals 24. And that makes sense, because if I were to plug 24 into that, it would simplify to 2/3. Next one, cross products here, 6 times 5 and 2 times h. 6 times 5 is 30, equals 2h. So 2 times what equals 30? And if we don't know, we could divide both sides by 2, and we would find out that h equals 15. And again, we could plug 15 back in, solve the cross products for both of them, and they should equal each other. Last one, cross products. We're going to do 10 times 4 and 2 and 5/10 times k. So this would be 40 equals 2 and 5/10 k. So now, because we are multiplying, we're going to do the opposite and divide both sides by 2 and 5/10. So 40 divided by 2 and 5/10, which is 16. And that makes sense, because if I were to take 2.5 times 4, that would be 10. And 4 times 4 would be 16. So yes, that does make sense. All right, so we have, for every 18 people who have a sore throat, there are 2 people who actually have strep throat. If 72 patients have sore throats, how many of these people would we expect to have a sore throat? So we're going to set up a proportion to solve it. So I'm going to look at the people who have a sore throat over having strep. Again, however we set up one side of the proportion, the other side needs to be set up the same way. So it said 18 people have sore throats over 2 people actually having strep. So then if we have 72 with a sore throat, we want to know how many of them we would expect to have strep. So I set up my proportion. Now I'm going to solve the proportion by solving my cross products again. So 2 times 72 and 18 times x. So 72 times 2, which is 144, 18x. Divide both sides by 18. So 144 divided by 18, which is x equals 8. So that means we would expect 8 people to have strep. Let me just write that out. Because it's a word problem, we should have some sort of label on it to tell us what that number means. Next one, Salvador can run 120 meters in 24 seconds. At this rate, how many seconds will it take him to run a 300 meter? So again, we're going to set up a proportion. I'm going to do meters over seconds because that's the order that it showed up in the problem. So if he can run 120 meters over 24 seconds, we want to know how many seconds. So seconds is on the bottom. The 300 meters is on the top. Use our cross products here. So 24 times 300 and 120 times x. Sorry, I'm mixing up between the dot and the x for the multiplication symbol. So 24 times 300, which is 7,200, equals 120x. Divide both sides by 120, whatever number is with the variable. So 7,200 divided by 120, x equals 60. So it's at how many seconds? So that would be 60 seconds to run those 300 meters. Okay, these are the ones for you to try on your own. I'm going to look to see that you have these completed in your notes, so give them a try. That's all for solving proportions. Look back, make sure that your notes have everything that they should include there. Check your understanding. Is this something that you could explain to a friend? If not, rewatch parts of the videos that you are still stuck on. Otherwise, iExcel is always available for you to practice. Make sure you have your notes in class for assignments and our class discussions.